Hello and welcome to the Bankers Tech Talk video series, looking at everything fintech. We've been doing this series now for 5 years, and you can watch all the previous episodes on thebanker.com/techtalks. I'm Joy Macknight, Managing Editor of The Banker, and with me is Shane O'Hara, who's CEO of Paymentology, a payments processing platform. Shane, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Joy.
So can you tell me a little bit about why you decided to set up Paymentology and sort of how it differentiates itself from other payments processing platforms?
Of course, we set up Paymentology in 2015, and the objective really was to cater for a lack in the market of flexible, adaptive, high-performance processing. So the processing industry has been pretty much governed by large legacy operators over the past 20, 30 years. And that's led to a lack of forward movement, a lack of advancement in terms of what processing can offer to the banks. And Paymentology really has been born out of a need to cater for that shortfall.
Okay, and so where are you making the most inroads?
We're finding that banks are finally starting to digitize en masse. That's partially been driven, I guess, by the likes of Revolut and Starling showing advancements in that challenger bank arena. The rest of the banking community now seems to be coming to the table, and they're seeking to be more involved in the cardholder spend journey. And what that means is they need to be in possession of the data. If you're a bank, and traditionally, you've been banking with a legacy processor, typically you've been standing at quite a distance from your cardholder, from your consumer. And that needs to change. The likes of Revolut and Starling and Monzo and all of these operators are much closer to their consumer. And the traditional banks are finding they need to do that. If they're going to compete, they need to do that. And one way to do that is to ensure that you're engaged with a processor like Paymentology that's delivering that data to you at the point of spend.
A lot of people have been talking about how fraud has been increasing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you give me some examples of like how it's been increasing and where is this fraud coming from?
We're certainly seeing increase in certain types of fraud over the last number of months since the pandemic started. Primarily, it seems to be phishing type attempts. So this would be fraudsters that are attempting to take advantage of, people who feel either vulnerable or particularly at risk through the pandemic. They're being encouraged to click on links. It's the kind of thing we've seen in the past, but it does seem to be accelerated at the moment. As far as processing is concerned, we see an elevated rate of fraud incidents on e-commerce transactions in particular. It's where a consumer has been encouraged to go to a website and to click purchase and enter their card details. Paymentology has an advanced rules engine, the purpose of which is to detect exactly this type of fraud. And as I mentioned, to provide that knowledge onwards to the bank, so the bank is able to instantly communicate with the consumer, either to their mobile app or by telephone in some instances, to warn the consumer of the fraud. So that linkage is improving all the time now through modern processing.
And my last question is really around the fact that there's been a lot of disruption within the card industry. What is your opinion in terms of the future for cards?
I guess the interesting aspect of this is we all use the terminology cards, but really a payment is equally on plastic or on a mobile device. The concept of card itself seems to be disappearing, but the underlying infrastructure is advancing and is simply a payment mechanism, a payment channel. So we do see a constant evolution behind the scenes, both in terms of enhancing the fraud analytics, as we've just mentioned, but also, and I think equally important now, is the ability of the processor to arm the bank with the tools to provide that consumer experience going forward. So we envisage a world in the future where the bank is now going to be able to offer products literally at point of spend that it could not do in the past. And that could be anything from offering insurance on small purchase items to buy now, pay later or even credit on large ticket items. If you imagine, we live in a world where when we're buying a car, we typically will go to a leasing company and look for credit through that channel. There's no reason that you would not buy a car in the future on a debit card and immediately get an offer from the bank to your mobile device of appropriate leasing terms, because the bank is in possession of the knowledge now, which it wasn't in possession of in the past. So that's where we see the future, banks being armed to provide the products to the consumer.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your insights, Shane.
Thank you very much indeed, Joy.